Surviving extreme cold without a source of open fire seems like certain death to modern man. History knows many examples when entire expeditions, equipped with the latest technology of their time, died of hypothermia, unable to build a fire. However, the indigenous peoples of North America lived, traveled, and fought for centuries in the harsh winters of the Great Plains, where temperatures dropped to critical levels. Their secret was not to fight the cold, but to coexist with it, using the laws of physics and biology. The absence of fire was often not accidental, but a tactical necessity during military campaigns or when hunting cautious animals. Smoke and light could reveal the location of a unit to enemies many kilometers away in the clear, frosty air. In such situations, warriors relied on their deep knowledge of the properties of materials, the landscape, and the capabilities of the human body. These survival techniques were passed down from generation to generation and honed to perfection by life itself in the harsh climate. What is now called extreme survival was part of the daily winter routine for the Plains Indians. Their heat preservation techniques were so effective that they could sleep comfortably even in the snowy desert. Watch the video to the end to find out how the right diet could replace a stove and what role ordinary dry grass played in keeping warm. What if I told you that a thin leather wall can retain heat better than brickwork? The tepee, the dwelling of the nomadic peoples of the plains, is often mistakenly perceived as a simple tent, unsuitable for severe frosts. In fact, it is a complex aerodynamic structure designed specifically to withstand storm winds and extreme temperatures. The main secret of the winter tepee was its double shell, which created a thermos effect. Inside the main cone, a second wall was installed, called the inner lining or dew, which reached approximately human height. Between the outer skin of the tepee and this inner wall was an air gap that served as a powerful insulator. Cold air entering from outside was trapped in this space and heated by the warmth emanating from the living area. This air gap worked on the same principle as modern double-glazed windows or multi-layered clothing. It prevented condensation and frost from forming on the interior walls of the dwelling, keeping it dry, which was critical for warmth. Even without a central hearth, the difference in temperature between the inside and outside could be significant due to human respiration and this insulation alone. The external shape of the cone also played a huge role in conserving energy. The wind hitting the sloping surface flowed smoothly around the dwelling, not blowing out the heat as it does with rectangular buildings. Snow did not accumulate on steep slopes, which reduced the risk of collapse and created an additional snowbank at the base, acting as insulation. The covering material, tanned bison hides, had unique vapor-permeable and windproof properties. The leather, treated with smoke and fat, was impervious to wind, but allowed microscopic amounts of moisture to escape. This prevented the greenhouse effect, in which damp clothing and bedding could cause hypothermia. The entrance to the tepee in winter was always closed with a special door made of thick skin on a wooden frame. It fit tightly against the opening, eliminating the slightest drafts that could cool the dwelling in a matter of minutes. Often, the entrance was made oval and raised above the ground so that the person entering would not bring snow inside. In winter, the lower edge of the teepee's cover was pressed tightly to the ground with stones or logs and then covered with snow. This created a sealed connection that completely blocked the access of the icy bottom wind. The interior space was transformed into a closed capsule, protected from the aggressive external environment. Inside the dwelling, the space was organized to minimize the circulation of cold air near the floor. Belongings, bags of supplies, and saddles were placed along the walls, creating an additional barrier against the cold. The living area was moved closer to the center, where the most heat was retained. This design allowed people to survive even when it was impossible to build a fire due to the lack of firewood in the steppe. The very structure of the dwelling worked to preserve every degree of heat emitted by human bodies. It was architecture born of wind and cold, ideal in its functionality. We would be interested to hear your opinion. Why do you think modern tourist tents rarely use the double wall principle with such an air gap? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new analyses of historical technologies. Are you ready to learn the truth about how people became living batteries? In conditions where there was no external source of heat, the only available energy generator was the human body. The Indians understood perfectly well that one person was doomed on a freezing night, but a group had a high chance of survival. Sleeping together was not a matter of convenience or tradition, but a strict survival technique. A family or group of hunters would lie down to sleep in a specific order, creating a single thermal core. Children or elderly people who needed the most protection from the cold were usually placed in the center. Stronger and more resilient adults lay down at the edges, creating a living shield for the rest with their bodies. People lay close together, often intertwining their legs and arms for maximum heat transfer. This arrangement reduced the total surface area through which precious heat was lost. The group became a single organism with a slow cooling rate, able to withstand the cold all night long. They covered themselves with large shared skins, which were sewn together from several bison robes. Such a single blanket worked much more effectively than several individual capes. Underneath it, a common microclimate was created, where the warmth of one person supported another. An important point was the insulation of the head and shoulders, through which a significant part of the heat escapes. People often slept covered with skins over their heads, creating a closed space under the blanket, warmed by their own breath. Although the air became stuffy, this allowed the temperature in the sleeping area to rise to quite comfortable levels. On military campaigns, when there was no shelter at all, soldiers used the fan sleep technique. They lay down in a circle, with their feet toward the center, pressed tightly against each other's sides. The center of the circle, where their feet converged, became the warmest area, protecting their limbs from frostbite. Sometimes, even when sleeping in a group, they used a rotating duty system. The people on the outside who started to freeze could switch places with those in the middle who were already warm. This rotation ensured an even distribution of heat and gave each member of the group a chance to regain their strength. The psychological aspect of such sleep was no less important than the physical one. The feeling of elbow to elbow, physical contact with fellow tribesmen gave a sense of security and calm. This helped to relax and fall asleep, which was critical for restoring energy. Even in the harshest conditions, when the temperature dropped below 40 degrees, such a living pile could maintain a positive temperature inside the cocoon of skins. The heat output of an adult human is comparable to the power of a small incandescent lamp. A group of 5 or 6 people generated enough energy to survive the night without a fire. The ability to share warmth was the highest manifestation of mutual aid and trust within the tribe. It destroyed the concept of personal space for the sake of a common goal, the survival of the clan. In the fight against the cold, man was not a wolf to man, but a stove. Would you be able to sacrifice your personal space for the sake of survival in such conditions? What I am about to show you surpasses modern membrane fabrics. The basis of individual protection from the cold was a bison robe, a bison hide tanned in a special way. It was not just a piece of fur, but a high-tech product whose properties depended on when the animal was hunted and how it was processed. For winter robes, hides obtained in late autumn or early winter were used when the bison had grown a thick and dense undercoat. The secret of warmth lay in the unique structure of bison wool. The thick undercoat of thin, twisted fibers created thousands of microscopic air pockets that trapped warm air close to the body. Long, stiff guard hairs protected this insulating layer from wind and snow, preventing it from being crushed. The hides were tanned using a method called brain tanning, which made the leather incredibly soft and pliable even in severe frost. Unlike modern tanning agents, natural fats and enzymes did not clog the pores of the leather. This allowed the robe to breathe, wicking excess moisture away from the body but not letting the cold wind through. Indians wore robes with the fur inside on the coldest days and nights. This created an air layer directly against the skin, working on the principle of modern thermal underwear. The skin on the outside became a windproof screen that heated up quickly in the sun but cooled slowly. The robe was large enough for a person to wrap themselves completely in it, covering their head and feet. During sleep, the robe became a cocoon, hermetically sealing its owner from the outside environment. The edges of the skin were tucked under the body to prevent drafts from below. Robes were often decorated with geometric patterns on the inside. The paint applied to the skin additionally clogged the pores in certain places, creating areas of increased wind protection. This was not only beautiful, but also functional, adding stiffness and density to the material. Old, worn-out robes were not thrown away, but used as bedding. Having lost some of their wool, they still retained the excellent insulating properties of the leather itself. Layering was the key to success. Several thin layers worked better than one thick one. Warriors on campaigns used special lightweight robes made from the skins of young bulls or calves. They were less bulky, but thanks to their softer fur, they kept the wearer just as warm as the heavy skins of adult animals. Such mobility was vital when it was necessary to jump up quickly and engage in battle. Caring for the robe was an important part of winter life. It was regularly beaten out in the snow to clean and fluff up the fur. Matted or dirty fur lost its insulating properties. Dry and clean wool ensured that the next night would be warm. For Native Americans, a bison robe was a home they carried on their shoulders. It saved them in places where any other fabric would have turned into an icy shell. It was the perfect natural material, difficult to surpass even with modern technology. Don't forget to like this post if you are impressed by the ingenuity of this ancient clothing. What if I told you that the ground beneath your feet can be warmer than the air? When night fell on travelers in the open steppe, with no way to set up a tepee, they turned to the ground for shelter. The soil, especially in lowlands or ravines, maintains a much more stable temperature than the open air, which is swept by icy winds. Native Americans skillfully used the terrain, literally burrowing into the landscape to survive. Ravines, dry creek beds, and leeward slopes of hills served as natural shelters. Ravine walls provided protection from the wind, reducing wind chill, which is the main enemy on the plains. Even a small depression in the ground could save a life by creating a zone of relative calm. If time and soil permitted, warriors dug small individual pits or trenches to sleep in. Such a pit acted as a trap for warm air, which, as is well known, rises upward but is retained close to the body in a confined space. The pit was covered with skins or branches, creating a miniature dugout. The bottom of such a shelter was never left bare. The icy ground quickly draws heat from the body through direct heat transfer. Therefore, the bottom was carefully lined with a thick layer of dry grass, wormwood branches, or spruce branches, creating a powerful insulating mattress. Sometimes natural caves or niches in the rocks were used, but with great caution. Stone can be treacherous, it retains cold for a long time, and can act as a refrigerator. Therefore, contact between the body and the stone was always prevented by thick bedding made of skins. In wooded areas, pits were often dug under low-hanging branches of coniferous trees. Snow lingering on the branches created a natural roof, and the space under the tree circle, was often free of deep snow. It was a ready-made shelter that required minimal finishing. When spending the night in an open area without the possibility of digging, snow drifts were used as windbreaks. The snow was trampled down and formed into a horseshoe shape, with the open part facing away from the wind. Inside this barrier, the temperature was several degrees higher than outside. Knowledge of the properties of different soils also helped in choosing a location. Sandy soils freeze faster and deeper than clay or peat soils. The Indians intuitively chose places with warmer soil, often using vegetation as a guide. Earthen shelters were often camouflaged with snow and grass, which had a double effect: thermal insulation and concealment. The warrior became part of the landscape, invisible to the enemy and protected from the elements. The ability to blend in with the ground was the highest skill of survival. These methods, based on the use of geothermal properties and wind protection, made it possible to survive the night even without outer clothing. The ground, which was a road during the day, became a blanket at night. Do you think that using the terrain is a more reliable means of protection than building temporary shelters? Nature provided materials that were as good as modern synthetic insulation in terms of their thermal properties. Dry grass, especially certain types of sedge that grow in swamps, had a tubular stem structure. This meant that air was sealed inside each blade of grass, the world's best insulator. The Indians harvested large quantities of this grass before winter. They used it to fill the space between the outer and inner walls of moccasins. This grass lining not only kept the feet warm, but also absorbed excess moisture from the feet, which could then be simply shaken out along with the frozen grass. Moss, especially dry sphagnum, was used as a hygroscopic and warming material. It was placed in children's cradles and used as padding and clothing. Moss has antiseptic properties, which prevented the development of fungus and diaper rash in conditions where it was impossible to wash. Inside teepees or temporary shelters, the floor was always covered with a thick layer of vegetation. Sage or willow branches were laid down as the first layer, creating a springy and airy base. Dry grass or pine needles were poured on top, and only then were the skins spread out. This layered bed raised the sleeper 10 to 15 centimeters above the cold surface of the ground. The air circulating in the intertwining grass and branches prevented the cold from the ground from reaching the body. Sage also had a pleasant smell and repelled insects that could hibernate in the soil. The bark of some trees, such as cedar or juniper, split into fibers and turned into soft and warm cotton wool. This material was used to insulate the seams of clothing and places where the wind could penetrate under the skin. It was a kind of natural sealant. Grass mats woven from long stems were used as portable mattresses or screens. They could be quickly unfolded during a break, creating an insulated area for sitting or sleeping. They were light, durable, and if necessary, could be used as kindling if a fire was allowed. To keep their hands warm, they used mittens made of animal skins stuffed with cattail down or dry moss. Hands immersed in such an environment warmed up instantly due to the reflection of their own heat. This was more effective than simple gloves, as the fingers warmed each other. Even in the hungriest times, the attitude towards harvesting grass for warmth was extremely serious. Losing a supply of dry grass on a hike was equivalent to losing part of one's clothing. It was a strategic resource that weighed almost nothing but was worth its weight in gold. The use of plant insulators shows a deep understanding of the physics of heat transfer. The Indians did not just cover themselves with skins, they constructed complex insulation systems from everything that grew under their feet. Guess which material provides the best protection from the cold? Paradoxically, it was snow, the symbol of winter and cold, that became the main ally in preserving heat. Freshly fallen snow consists of 90 to 95% air trapped between ice crystals. This makes it one of the most effective natural insulators available in unlimited quantities. The peoples who lived further north and the tribes of the plains who adopted their experience used snow to insulate the bottom of their dwellings. They piled up a high snow wall around their teepees, which could reach the middle of the wall. This created an additional thick wall that was impervious to the wind. During heavy snowstorms, when it was impossible to pitch a tent, hunters dug caves in snowdrifts. The temperature inside such a snow cave, heated only by body heat and breath, stays around 0 degrees, even if it is -40 outside. In such a shelter, water does not freeze and a person can sleep without the risk of freezing to death. A quincy is a temporary shelter that was built by piling up a large mound of snow, allowing it to settle, and then digging out a cavity inside. The walls of the quincy were compacted and eventually turned into an icy shell that retained heat very well. The entrance was made below floor level so that warm air rising upward would not escape, creating a heat trap. When spending the night in the forest without building complex structures, people would cover themselves with snow on top of their bison robes. A layer of snow 30 to 40 centimeters thick acted as an additional down blanket. The main thing was to make sure that the snow did not melt from contact with clothing and did not wet it. Snow blocks were used to build windbreaks around temporary camps. These walls protected not only from the wind, but also from prying eyes, blending in with the general white background of the plain. Inside the perimeter, a microclimate was created where the wind did not blow the heat out of the clothes. It was important to monitor ventilation in snow shelters. Over time, snow can freeze from the inside due to breathing and stop allowing air to pass through, which can lead to suffocation. Therefore, a small hole was always made in the ceiling, which was regulated with a stick or mitten. Using snow required overcoming a psychological barrier. Forcing yourself to lie down in cold snow to warm up is an action that goes against the instincts of an unprepared person. But for the indigenous people, it was a natural and logical form of protection. Snow was also used to clean clothes of dirt and grease, which reduced thermal insulation. Washing with snow in the cold allowed clothes to be freshened up without getting wet, which was critical for preserving their properties. In this way, the hostile elements were transformed into building material and protection. The ability to turn snow from an enemy into a friend was one of the main skills of winter survival. Did you know that the temperature in a properly constructed snow shelter can be 30 degrees higher than outside? You won't believe it, but food was their main fuel instead of firewood. To produce heat without an external source, the body must burn a huge amount of calories. The Indians intuitively understood the connection between nutrition and thermoregulation. Their winter diet was radically different from their summer diet and was aimed at maximum fat consumption. The main winter food was pemmican, a concentrate of dried, ground bison meat mixed with large amounts of melted fat and sometimes berries. It was a real calorie bomb. A small piece of pemmican provided energy for several hours of active work or kept the body warm during sleep. Fat is the most energy-dense fuel for the body. Digestion of fatty foods causes prolonged thermogenesis, the process of heat production. By eating a portion of pemmican before bed, a person would load their internal furnace, which would keep them warm from the inside all night long. Unlike carbohydrates, which provide a quick but short burst of energy, fats are broken down slowly, providing a steady supply of heat. This allowed them to sleep peacefully without waking up in the middle of the night from cold and hunger. Indians could consume 2 to 3 times more calories in winter than in summer without gaining excess weight. Bone marrow and internal organ fat, which were considered delicacies, were also used. Warm, liquid fat was drunk directly during the cutting of the carcass if the hunt was successful. This gave the frozen hunter an instant surge of strength and warmth. Hot herbal decoctions, or simply hot water, if it was possible to heat it in advance and keep it in a wineskin under clothing, helped to raise the core body temperature. But the main source was still solid, fatty food. Hunger in winter killed faster than the cold, as a hungry person lost the ability to resist the frost. Pemmican supplies were made on a huge scale in the fall. They were stored in special leather bags called parfleche, which were buried in the ground or hidden in secret places. Having a supply of fat guaranteed the tribe's survival in case of prolonged blizzards when hunting was impossible. The Indians also knew that alcohol, which appeared with the arrival of Europeans, gave a false sense of warmth, but in fact contributed to rapid cooling. Therefore, in traditional survival culture, there was no place for stimulants that dilate blood vessels, only pure biological fuel. The metabolism of people living in such conditions was rebuilt. Their bodies learned to use brown fat more efficiently, a special tissue designed to generate heat rather than store energy. It was a biological adaptation at the cellular level. Thus, survival without fire began not with building a shelter, but with the right dinner. Pemmican was the battery that powered life in the icy desert. What I am about to tell you is prohibited in many modern armies around the world as sophisticated cold torture, unless you know one important secret. The coldest and densest part of the air in any room or outdoors always accumulates at the very surface of the earth. In addition, soil frozen over the winter has enormous heat capacity and acts as an endless energy absorber. The earth is capable of literally sucking precious heat out of the human body, even through several layers of thick bison skins. This process of heat loss through direct contact, called conduction, kills much faster than frosty air. To avoid this deadly effect, Native Americans widely used elevated sleeping technologies. In permanent winter camps, where the tribe planned to live for months, special engineered platforms for sleeping were often built inside the tipis. These beds were constructed from hundreds of thin, flexible willow rods, stripped of their bark. These beds raised the sleeper to a height of 30 to 50 centimeters above the icy floor. The willow lattice was surprisingly elastic, working like a modern orthopedic mattress with springs. Its main advantage was that it created a life-saving air gap under the bed. This provided the necessary ventilation from below and reliable insulation from the cold coming from the ground. The ends of the long willow mats were attached to special wooden tripods, which also served as comfortable sloping backrests. During the day, you could sit on them like on a chair, leaning your back against a soft skin. This design was incredibly light, yet sturdy, able to support the weight of a large warrior. Thick woven grass mats were first laid on the bare willow lattice, serving as the first layer of insulation. Several layers of bison skins with thick winter fur were thrown on top. This created a soft and very warm bed, completely isolated from any physical contact with the frozen floor. In northern regions with very deep snow, a kind of hammock or hard suspended bunk was used. They were attached with ropes directly to the sloping poles of the tepee frame or to tree trunks in the forest. This not only guaranteed protection from the cold ground, but also made effective use of space. Raising the bed freed up scarce space below, which was used to store things, tools, and a supply of dry firewood. Under such a raised bed, useful space was created where the air was slightly warmer due to the lack of direct contact with the ice. Sometimes things and food that should not freeze, such as water or fat reserves, were stored there. This was the most rational and wise use of the limited living space of a conical dwelling. Warriors on long campaigns unable to build complex beds used forest materials. They chopped thick spruce branches or springy shrubs and stacked them in high, dense piles. At the top of this green haystack, they made their beds, covering themselves with cloaks. The higher and more lush the pile of branches, the further away from the icy ground the human body was. In the longhouses of the Iroquois and other forest tribes, sleeping places were originally designed on high shelves along the walls. They were located about a meter above the earthen floor, which was ideal for heat conservation. Heavy cold air flowed down into the passageway, while people slept in a warm cloud above. Deep pits were often dug under these bunks to store vegetables, or even small fires were lit for heating when it was safe to do so. But even without additional fire, such a significant height reliably protected against the icy drafts coming in through the doors. It was important not only to raise the bed above the ground, but also to carefully insulate the sides of the bed from air circulation. To do this, the hanging edges of the skins were tucked tightly under the mattress or tied to the frame. This was done so that cold air could not seep under the sleeping area from below and cool the back. The result was a warm, suspended cradle or cocoon that retained the body's own heat. Such raised structures also protected against dampness and moisture that could appear on the floor. With a sudden warming or active heating of the hearth, the snow on the floor could melt, turning into a dirty puddle. A dry bed in such conditions is literally a matter of life and death, and the raised platform guaranteed this dryness. This ironclad principle, never sleep on the bare ground, was the first rule that Native American children learned. The ground might have been a good shelter from the wind behind a hill, but as a bed, it was always an insidious enemy. Why do you think the bottom of modern high-tech sleeping bags is often made less warm than the top? The answer lies precisely here. The insulation crumples under the weight of the body and stops warming, so all hope rests on the insulating mat that replaces the willow rods used by Native Americans. The peoples of the wooded Northeast, such as the powerful Iroquois or Huron, solved the age-old problem of winter cold in a completely different way than their neighbors, the nomads of the plains. Their strategic response to the harsh winter was the longhouse, a monumental stationary structure designed to last for centuries. It was not just a dwelling, but a real covered village, accommodating several dozen related families under one roof. It was, in fact, the first multi-unit residential complex in the region's history, where the architecture itself worked to preserve the clan's collective warmth. The longhouse was built from a strong arched frame of young, flexible tree trunks, which was then covered with large sheets of bark. The main building material used was elm bark, which had unique properties for these latitudes. Bark is an excellent natural insulator with a porous structure that works on the principle of a cork. The walls of the dwelling were often made double, creating a thermos effect. A thick layer of dried moss or clay mixed with grass was laid between the outer and inner layers of bark. This created a powerful thermal barrier that prevented the icy wind from penetrating inside and the precious heat from escaping outside. Inside, the house was strictly zoned and divided into separate living compartments or cubicles for each family. They were arranged symmetrically along a wide central passageway where common hearths burned. These partitions made of bark and skins not only provided the necessary privacy for the inhabitants, they also divided the huge interior space of the hall into smaller areas, which were much easier to heat with breath and body heat. Each of these cubicles created its own cozy and warm microclimate, protected from the drafts of the central aisle. The Iroquois architects had a good understanding of physics. Warm air is always lighter than cold air and rises. Therefore, the low ceilings of the sleeping compartments and wide shelves bunks were raised high above the earthen floor. People slept literally under the roof in the warmest area of the house where heated air accumulated. Below in the central passageway and at ground level, the air remained colder and heavier, but no one slept there. The complete absence of windows in the walls and only two small doors at the ends of the long building minimized heat loss. The doors were always protected by heavy double skins of bear or bison hides, creating airtight vestibules. Entering and leaving the house in winter was strictly regulated by custom, so as not to cool the room unnecessarily. Children knew that the door could not be left open for a second. Even if for some reason, large fires were not lit in the house, for example, due to a lack of dry firewood at the end of winter or military camouflage, the cold did not set in immediately. The huge number of people constantly present in this enclosed space acted as a living battery. Hundreds of bodies heated the air with their breath and body heat, keeping the temperature above zero. The thermal inertia of such a massive building was enormous. It heated up very slowly in the fall, but also cooled down very slowly in the winter. The deep snow that sometimes covered the longhouse from the outside up to the roof was never cleared from the walls. It served as a magnificent additional layer of external insulation, gifted by nature itself. The house turned into a huge warm snow burrow, inside which life glowed. The social structure of the house's inhabitants also directly contributed to their survival in the harsh climate. The hard work of insulating the walls, harvesting tons of moss, and repairing the siding was always done collectively by the entire clan. A single person or a small nuclear family simply could not have built and maintained such an effective shelter. The complex ventilation system through openings in the roof was fully adjustable from the ground using long poles. In severe frosts, these hatches were closed with thick sheets of bark, leaving only tiny gaps for dangerous carbon dioxide to escape. Controlling invisible air and smoke flows was a real art, mastered by the older women of the clan mothers. The longhouse is a striking example of how a sedentary lifestyle allowed for the creation of substantial defenses against the cold that were unavailable to nomads. It was a veritable wooden fortress, protecting people not so much from enemies as from the merciless winter. The final and complete victory over the deadly cold in the wild plains would have been absolutely impossible without the formation of a special, unique psychology and deep physiological adaptation of the body. From early childhood, literally from their first uncertain steps, Native Americans purposefully and rigorously trained their bodies to withstand extremely low temperatures. This was not just a tradition, but a harsh system of upbringing where nature itself was the main and ruthless teacher. Parents understood that excessive care and warmth would ruin their child's future, so they created Spartan conditions for them. Daily morning bathing in the icy water of the river or rubbing with prickly snow until redness was the absolute norm, even for toddlers who had barely learned to walk. Mothers dipped their babies into the ice hole for a moment to activate their hidden immune reserves. Walking in light clothing and moccasins on bare feet until late autumn and sleeping in the fresh air hardened the body, making it much less sensitive to the aggressive cold outside. The skin became coarser and denser, and the nerve endings got used to the sharp wind and stopped sending distress signals to the brain every time the temperature dropped. Modern anthropologists and physiologists have proven that the indigenous peoples of the North and the Great Plains have genetically developed a higher basal metabolic rate. Their bodies work like powerful biological furnaces, burning calories at an incredible rate to actively generate internal heat. They also have an increased content of so-called brown fat, which is designed by nature specifically to warm internal organs. In addition, Native Americans have a much better and more effective vascular response to cold, known in medicine as cold vasodilation or Lewis's reaction. When a European's hands turn white and lose sensitivity in the cold due to vasospasm, the Native American's body works differently. Blood periodically rushed to their limbs in powerful hot waves, dilating the vessels and preventing the tissues from freezing. This amazing biological property allowed hunters to work with their bare hands in the bitter cold, tying complex knots or pulling tight bowstrings. But perhaps the most important secret weapon, inaccessible to outsiders, was not in their muscles or blood, but in their heads. Panic is the invisible killer that destroys a person in the cold the fastest, shutting down the mind. Frightened by the sudden cold, a person begins to sweat uncontrollably from the release of adrenaline, makes chaotic and useless movements, quickly burning through their last reserves of glucose. Indians, on the other hand, learned from childhood to enter a special state of deep inner peace, similar to a meditative trance. Through an effort of will, they slowed their heartbeat and breathing, entering an energy-saving mode. They knew how to control the muscle tremors that usually occur involuntarily, turning them into a source of warmth rather than exhaustion. They did not treat the cold as an evil enemy or demon to be defeated in battle. The cold was perceived as an objective reality, part of the great circle of life, with which one must coexist in harmony. Complaining about frost, wind, or snow was considered not only useless and foolish, but also behavior deeply unworthy of a true warrior or mother. This stoic, philosophical acceptance of harsh reality allowed them to maintain a clear, cool, and calculating mind. This was critically important for making the only correct decisions in emergency situations, when the price of any mistake was instant death. There were special secret mental practices, passed down by shamans, that allowed one to summon the so-called inner fire. Deep concentration on vivid visual images of the summer sun, hot coals, and hot flames helped to trick the brain. This reduced the subjective sensation of cold, causing the body to believe that it was warm and to dilate its blood vessels. It was like a kind of survival meditation, accessible only to initiated warriors who had undergone initiation. The ability to feel, hear, and understand their bodies was brought to absolute animalistic perfection in the trackers. A hunter in a motionless ambush lasting many hours knew exactly the critical moment when he needed to get up and actively stretch. He felt the line beyond which irreversible freezing and sleep leading to death began. And he knew when, on the contrary, he needed to freeze, curl up into a tight ball, and conserve the precious energy of his core. It was a constant, minute-by-minute internal diagnosis of all the body systems, working on a subconscious level. High natural pain tolerance also played a huge role in survival in the icy desert. Extreme cold causes acute physical pain comparable to being burned by open fire. The ability to endure this excruciating discomfort for hours and days allowed them to continue to act, hunt, and protect their families. A weak-minded person in such conditions would curl up in a fetal position and give up, waiting for the end. The Indians' will to live was always stronger than the basic animal instinct for comfort and safety. Strong social support within the clan and rough, specific humor helped them endure the hardships of endless winter. Constant jokes about the cold, ironic remarks about the weather, and storytelling together in the darkness of a warm tepee distracted the mind from the harsh physical sensations. The high morale of the group and a sense of camaraderie were as important for survival as the availability of dry firewood. Loneliness in winter was as deadly as hunger. The upbringing of children included harsh, sometimes cruel survival skills from an early age. A child knew for sure that it was absolutely forbidden to eat snow, as it lowers the body temperature from the inside and leads to hypothermia. He knew that you couldn't sweat in the cold because moisture meant death. Children were taught to tell adults immediately and honestly if they lost feeling in their fingers or nose to prevent gangrene. Survival was not a matter of luck or a gift from the gods, but a complex science that was taught from infancy and tested every winter. One child's mistake could slow down the group and cost everyone their lives. It was this unique combination of physical toughness, iron discipline of mind, and calm attitude toward nature, honed over centuries, that made the Indians the true masters of the winter plains. They did not just survive in this icy hell, fighting for every breath. They lived there a full, rich life, raising children and creating a culture where other peoples quickly died of despair and cold. The story of the survival of the indigenous peoples of North America without fire is a lesson in the incredible ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit. Deprived of the technologies we consider essential today, they used a deep understanding of the laws of nature to turn the deadly cold into a tolerable living condition. From tepee construction to the Pemmican diet, from the use of snow to mental toughness, every element of their daily life was part of a unified, perfect system of protection. This knowledge proves that humans are capable of adapting to any conditions if they act in harmony with their environment rather than trying to fight it with brute force. Their experience remains a relevant reminder that the main tools for survival are knowledge, ingenuity, and willpower. Which of the methods described did you find most surprising? Could you spend the night in a snowdrift, warming yourself only with thoughts of warmth and a piece of dried meat? Write your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel to learn more about the forgotten technologies of the past.